Die alte Lederei, die hat ihren Namen daher, dass das hier früher ein Lederbetrieb war. Do-it-yourself-Workshops, zeige, wie man Möbel und Interior-Design-Objekte selber baut. Keine besonderen Fähigkeiten nötig, da kann jeder einfach so kommen, wie er ist. Seid herzlich eingeladen, mich mit Fragen zu bombardieren. Und ansonsten wünsche ich euch viel Spaß dabei.
Ich wollte nur einen kurzen Shoutout machen und euch einladen. Ich organisiere auch eine kleine Konferenz, die sich viel mit Kreativität und Innovation beschäftigt. Vor allem den Prozessen dahinter, die heißt auch Process. .process.org.
Dann viel Spaß mit Karl und ja, wie der glückliche Zufall Hyperloop und alles dein Leben verändert hat, glaube ich, ne? Ja, dann viel Spaß.
I didn't prepare a presentation because I thought and understood I'm an engineer, just first of all, who I am. I'm not even an engineer. I work for an engineering company. I work for an industrial company, Leibold, that we spoke about before. And, well, but we are an engineering company and we sell industrial products. And usually I'm used to speak in front of, well, engineers or people who are interested in our products. And then I said, okay, today you're speaking in front of a creative crowd. Probably not the people you can express or impress with, you know, fancy slides or presentations. So let's try to do this without and see if I can focus you on, well, what I have to say. And, well, serendipity is the talk of today, or the theme of today. And to be honest, it's not a word I usually use in my vocabulary. I don't have it. There's even a German word for it, Serendipität.
Yeah.
Who of the German speakers have ever used it? No. But it has an easy meaning. So it's an event by fortune, an event by chance, an event by happiness. And I think this is something that, well, I hope I can contribute something. Because, well, I work with an industrial corporation now since almost 10 years. I started in 2007. I studied management and economics in Italy. And when you study management and economics, you're always in an environment where, so what are you going to earn your money from? Or what's your business going to be? What's the big startup idea that you have? And while you're sitting there with your students and with your fellow friends and everybody has these great new ideas, and then 2006 Facebook pops up and all the other ideas, my best idea was always, well, Carl, you're a good cook. You know, why don't we make I don't know, a pasta bar in Italy? Or because this is something that you can do, this is something that you can do with your hands and maybe earn a living with. But it was never the big enough picture. So I did choose the path to become an employee of a global corporate. And I haven't regretted it since. But what has happened is while I walked well, that career path down the road, and I spent quite a few years abroad, probably half of my life abroad. I did every two years something new. One of the last jobs was to be a manager in China. Now 2 years here in Cologne, and that stint just came to an end because now I'm moving to the US. And, but it was always that thing, okay, this corporate career is dragging you along and there's always a new opportunity. So no real change or need for change to think about, so what is that big business idea that you wanted to go back with when you were still studying? And well, the pasta bar is still not an option, but then luckily 2-3 years ago, I was on a business trip. And then I read an article about the Hyperloop. That was back, I think, end of 2013. No, it was 14. Who here has ever heard about the Hyperloop? Not that many. Great. That gives me the opportunity to talk about it. Who would feel comfortable explaining what the Hyperloop is? Well, probably not that many. So again, this is not a sales pitch, so I'll try not to make it too engineering or technical. But the Hyperloop basically changed my life. And at least my way of thinking. And the Hyperloop is supposed to be a new means of transportation. Yeah? What are the common means of transportation that we have today? It's the cars, it's trains, it's planes, boats. And that's why Hyperloop's proposing a fifth mode, a new mode of transportation, which is basically a high-speed train You take that, but you put that inside a tube, like a pipeline. Now, that pipeline you evacuate, you create a vacuum inside, or at least a partial vacuum, nothing like a perfect vacuum. And by that, you create a super fast bullet train inside the tube. Now, why a tube? Why a vacuum? Ever driven on a highway? Well, in Germany we have it. You open the window and you hold your hand outside, you feel the air resistance, right? And that is actually what's slowing you down in technical terms. So you create a pressure, a force, that is slowing and dragging us down. And this is actually the biggest obstacle to faster speed. So by creating a low pressure environment inside the tube, you don't have that obstacle anymore. So today, any fast train, if you look at the bullet trains, I think in Japan, the record is currently 604 kilometers per hour. It's a very thin and slow aerodynamic shaped train. Because to overcome that resistance, or to be able to go faster, the main problem is still not more power or more horsepower or even a more aerodynamic design. It's really the air resistance, that pressure. And that has an impact on the energy balance of any transportation system, but also, of course, then on speed, because it's the force that you require to accelerate. Enough technology. The key is, when I read about this, I said, oh great, they're probably going to need vacuum. And this is what we do. So Leibold is the oldest vacuum pump manufacturer, actually based here in Cologne. So we were founded here in 1850, so we're the oldest vacuum company in the world. And I said, and I read, so these guys have a vacuum problem. This is something that we know about, and this is something that we might be able to contribute. So what did I do? I said, oh, these guys, the Hyperloop teams, they sit in LA, in the US. So I just forwarded that article to our US colleagues and said, guys, you should go and check them out. They have a need. And that was it. And then I thought, I'm out of it and never have to think about it again. But that just wasn't the case, because the feedback from the sales team was, yeah, they're probably going to need vacuum, but not now. Probably not in 3 years, maybe in 5 or 10 years, because it's a crazy idea. So we have nothing to sell right now. They're still working on even figuring out how to build this. And then I said, and I go back, no, yeah, I understand we're not going to sell any pumps this year, but we might just get involved and start talking and start listening and see how we can contribute. And still no feedback, at least not in the beginning. So there was some resistance because it wasn't a sales job to be done there. But then the more I read about it and the more I got into it, I said, well, there is something that we can do about it. And the more I got into it, I got hooked. So I started, continuing down that path, I reached out to one of these Hyperloop startups and said, let's cooperate. I have nothing to sell to you. It's not a sales pitch, but we want to contribute. I think you're onto something big, and we'd like to be part of it. And this is what happened. I reached out, and I got a reply the same day. Yeah, sure, we have that problem, and we don't have anybody there yet, so why don't you contribute? And then it went about, okay, so here's the typical startup story. So it's the sweat equity story, where you say you contribute in return for some shares that may or may not ever turn out to be something good for you, to be at least in money terms. And I said, then I got this contract and took it back to the company and to our legal team. Yeah, they want us to sign this before we can start cooperating. And then they said, cooperate, that's fine, but the stock option deal we don't understand. So can you just take that out of the contract so that we can then really start focusing? Because that's just how we corporates are spun sometimes. Yeah. Oh, equity and stock options sounds risky. Let's not do that. And but we did it anyways. And what then began was a beautiful cooperation over the past years that took me around the globe because this idea has now developed. I mean, this was back in 2014, now we're in 2017. And we became a key technology partner, probably the first corporate partner to that technology development. And if you just, later on when you leave this event, Google Hyperloop. Anybody heard about Elon Musk? He's the inventor of that idea. First concepts of that have existed back in the late 1800s. Yeah? There was actually a transportation system in low pressure environment where it was a pneumatic tube system. It was the first metro of New York. Most people don't know. It was just so inefficient that it was never built to scale. So the metro as we know it today replaced it. Anyhow, so many ideas and evolutions of that have existed. I think the Jetsons, the comics, there's tube transportation there. You have these stories in Disney comics as well. And then over time, people and engineers, of course, worked on that. The Transrapid that we developed in Germany, I think that started in '76 even, had a similar approach. It was a high-speed train, but not in that low-pressure environment. And the reason it failed was because, not of the technology, but it was just not economic to build it and to scale it down. So Elon Musk thought that now I'm onto something big because the idea might not be new, but the technology now is cheap enough to actually to be able to build it and to scale it. Now, until now it's just the technology. But what kind of impact did it have on me? Well, the more I got involved in that story, the more I met with the Hyperloop teams, the more I met them in different events. They were invited as speakers to startup events. And now this is a world I got immersed in that I've never been part of, because we're, again, a big corporate, stock-listed company selling technology. Nothing to do with the creative world that sits here, nothing to do with the startup world that we usually think about, unless there's a startup that calls us up and says, I need vacuum pumps. We have nothing to do with them. But me visiting them, joining them on the conferences, supporting them as a corporate partner, which was important for them as a startup, seeing how they work, how they cooperate, how they collaborate. These guys came up and said they were one of the first beta testers to test Facebook Workplace. I don't know if some of you guys heard about that. It's basically a Facebook for work. And many other tools, Slack and everything. Again, new to the corporate environment. So I got immersed in that world, and again, it changed how I work today, how I think today, and it broadened my scope entirely. Because suddenly I saw myself in a situation where, oh, Carl, there's this other event, and they invited us to speak about the Hyperloop, but we can't go, can you go? I said, sure. Because now, over time, I was fit enough to, I can breathe and live it, and I could talk now 2 days about the Hyperloop and the opportunities it has. And I found myself to be a speaker at a startup conference. Wow. And it was great. And it was a great environment. It was a great experience. But not just that, because when you're at a startup environment, a startup conference, you hear about what everybody else has to say. And suddenly I sit in the audience and look at all the other pitches and say, well, this is relevant to us. Oh, this might be a furniture company, nothing to do with us, but the way they sell. Or that new tool, or the way they used augmented reality, the way they did e-commerce, etc. That can be translated in the way that we do business. Is there an opportunity for us to change the way of doing things that we have done for the past 167 years? And suddenly there was. I saw opportunity. So just from that small partnership, I got immersed in that whole new world of doing things, in that whole new world of collaborations, in that whole new world of opportunity. And that's probably what was most inspiring, because it really changed my way of thinking. So suddenly I wasn't thinking pasta bar anymore. Suddenly I was thinking, there's a new business model, how we can sell. There's a new service idea. There's a new technology that we can implement. And what we then basically did throughout the past 2 years, we started collaborating the same way that Hyperloop did. They searched for partners. And if you come, again, from an industrial background, you sometimes fall into the trap of a not invented here syndrome. We are engineers. We're a German technology company. Yeah? In Germany, you sell through the product. You sell through the technology. So if you look at your 4 P's of marketing, the Germans have the P for product, but usually not the other 3, right? Because you say, here's the pump, it speaks for itself. Or here's our brand name, it speaks for itself. It's just not the case anymore. Today, and I think that's true for your creative world, it's simply not enough to have the best product anymore. It's simply not enough to be the best creative mind or the best artist or to be the best actor or singer or whatever you do. If you want to earn money with it, if you want to sustain a living from it, if you want to run a business from it, then you need to understand the other 3 P's of the marketing. You need to understand how to build a business around it, how to sell, how to market yourself. And I think, again, us being a traditional company, we had our difficulties with that because it's just not where we were coming from. And if you look at all the corporate world again in Germany, most of the CEOs somewhere rose through the ranks of being an engineer. Today, you might not have the best product, but if you're more successful in selling it and being creative about the whole marketing process behind it, you stand a whole different chance. And that world is changing. And that world was always changing. We're not selling today the same way that we did 167 years ago. But that change is coming faster. So these innovation cycles are just shorter all the time. And so what we lacked as a corporate is a certain amount of agility. So then, take a step back. Throughout the past 2 years, I was then, again, immersed in these world of startups, in this world of opportunity, in this world of collaboration. And I started collaborating. So, what did we do? Instead of inventing and programming and doing everything by ourselves, we reached out to an augmented reality company that we actually met at Hyperloop and said, isn't this something that we can use for our industrial products? Far away from it. Then I wanted to ask for budgets about it, and people said, not really. Maybe in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, but now is not the place. And I went back, no, we need to do it now. Yes, we can't sell it today, so there's no direct return on investment, but we need to investigate today. We need to understand today what it could become so that when it's there, we are ready as well. Well, we have an advantage to be a first mover. Yeah? And so we went down that path. And I fought probably for over a year. I don't want to say fought, but I definitely swam upstream to get more support for that collaboration on augmented reality, for a technical industrial product. And it wasn't easy, but once we had something to show, we did an augmented reality day, and we invited some service people who never had an iPad in their hands, who never, of course, had seen augmented reality before, service people who take a wrench into their hands and clean a pump, or change an oil filter, or change a water filter, or do maintenance on an industrial product. And we said, so here's that thing, do it. Do what exactly? No, we're not telling you anything. So it's that case where you say, give an iPad into your grandmother's hand and see what she can do with it. And people started to play around with it and said, well, this is actually very helpful. In the beginning, they came in the morning, so what am I doing here and how long is it going to take because I need to go back to work? And then afterwards, they looked through the glass or through an iPad and said, oh, wow, this is what we need. This is what we need to do training. Because if I would have that, today our training material is a 97-page long printed document. So, but that's just how we work. And that's how many people work. But again, it wasn't about the augmented reality. It was about opening eyes. It was about showing opportunity. And that's what happened. Still, in order to keep that project running, I was looking at, well, where's the return on invest, how we can maybe build a business case around it. So I thought, well, this might be interesting for service. Because just by training, you're not going to sell anything, or at least you're not going to finance the investment needed to, well, run that product development. Then we ran it for another year. So now almost 2 years that we started that. And then we have been to Hanover Fair, which was just a few weeks ago. And we made the big bang and we showed the world what we can do with augmented reality with an industrial product. And it was an eye catcher. Still, my business case was service because I thought, okay, if we can sell that servicing and do-it-yourself service, I might, I don't know, sell it as an app or as a service. But suddenly, all our own salespeople come up and test it and play around with it. They see it for the first time. Oh, we have this? A corporate, our old corporate structures, we have augmented reality. How cool is that? And then they looked through it and they said, I need this in my sales pitch. I need this going out to the customers because what we have, how do we sell today? We take a brochure or maybe a nice PowerPoint that I can show you or have with me, but that's not the case. Because you're still out there, even if I were able to carry a 2-ton heavy industrial product with me, I'd still tell you, trust me, this pump can do what I promise it can do. But what else? How does that communication change if you say, it can do what I trust, what I tell you it can do, but let's have a look at it. Let's look inside it together. Let's look around it. Let me explain it to you. So the whole sales pitch changes. And that opened the eyes of our own salespeople. One example for collaboration. Next was QR codes. Was quite a hip, I think, a few years ago. I think then it went through a valley, of not being recognized again. But I think now it's on the rise again, because I think B2B is now recognizing the opportunities behind it. So it's not just about the QR code that you have at the next bus station, but now what we did is then found another partner, another startup to cooperate with, and now we have a QR code in every single type plate of our industrial products, and there's so many use cases behind it. So now I can go and try to sell and say, open your iPhone or whatever your smartphone is, scan that tag, and you'll be led directly to a website of us to buy the next service package or the suitable spare parts for it, etc. And there's so many other use cases behind it. I think the point I'm getting to is it's about this collaboration mindset that we all need to have, no matter in what world you are. It's that partnership mindset, because everybody is best at what they do, and collaboration allows you to bring all those different worlds and needs that you have today together. And that is definitely what has changed my view of thinking there. And the way that Hyperloop actually shows it quite nicely, if you put it on a scale, is today, what do you need to build a Hyperloop? Yeah? You need it all. You need, I don't know, electromagnetic propulsion. You need levitation. You need somebody who builds the tubes. You need architects to design the stations. You need people to think about the business models behind it. You need guys like us to do vacuum. So what can you do? How do you build a company, a new idea like that of that scale if you're a startup? You probably need, 500, 1,000 employees until you actually can build something. So when do you start earning money with it? What is the investment that you need to put in? And again, we're talking about a huge infrastructural project. How do you build that as a startup without even selling anything? Because it's going to take you years to build it. So how much investment can you pull in? Maybe you can, I don't know, but it's definitely difficult. So how's the way to do it? Something like that, a big idea, a big vision like that, what's the way to do it? It's through partnerships. Fortunate, serendipitous partnerships. The idea is, even if you were to hire, if you had all the money in the world, and if you were to hire all the people that you needed and say, okay, I need vacuum, so let's hire the 20 best vacuum engineers from Leibold or all the other vacuum companies out there, and let's pay them a salary and let's make them come here because we're going to need them. Are you going to get the 20 best people that you need from Leibold? Are you going to get the best able people or the best available people? Probably the latter. And that's the problem that you have in no matter what you do if you're looking for partners, if you're looking for resource. So what's the way to make sure you don't only get the best available people, but the best able people? Well, it is to partner. Yeah? Offer them a benefit, a mutual benefit, and bring them in. And this is how one of the Hyperloop startups has built it. They literally went and partnered up with the best minds, with NASA people, with ANSYS people for design, or with Leibold for vacuum. I'm not saying we're the best, but one of them, definitely resource, to get these people together. And this is how you can build a venture, a startup of that size, of that scale, with that vision, with that, in the beginning, low likelihood of ever to succeed. But with these partnerships, you increase that likelihood step by step and day by day. So back again to how did it change me? What was that serendipitous moment in my life? Well, it was that article that I read. It was that story that I just thought I could hand off to our salespeople, another crazy guy wanting to do something with vacuum. That's our daily business, by the way, but still something that I thought I'd never have to deal with. But just by getting more engaged and taking that leap of faith, by putting up some time up front, we built this partnership and many more down the road just by having that mind open. And today, I don't want to say it's a result of it, but now I'm moving to the US, I moved basically in April, but today is my moving day. So at 10 o'clock, actually, the people are knocking on my door to pack our stuff and the containers in front of the door. And I'm moving to the US, and that's the new opportunity of it. So now I'm moving closer to the market, which is partially, of course, the Hyperloop market, but again, the biggest vacuum market for us, and taking that next step. On Tuesday, I spoke in front of the Carnegie Mellon University. It's one of the leading engineering universities in in Pittsburgh and in the US. And it was that same story all over again. How can we partner? How can we build something together? Because everybody by themselves can't. And I think that's the point I'm trying to make here. Serendipity. Now, I do have a technical presentation to show what the Hyperloop is. It's a very cool presentation, but I was trying not to do a sales pitch. I hope that worked. I'm used to speak in front of engineers, and I think, if you speak in Carnegie Mellon, they want to understand every detail. So how's that levitation going to work? What is the problem? How do you overcome that obstacle, etc.? That's not what I tried to do today, so I hope that worked out.
Thank you so much, especially for coming
of course.
to Cologne. And we are not the big university of it.
Oh, you don't need to be.
Just a small crowd, but thank you so much, especially for the interesting talk. I'm working with Liveboard for years, and even I have no really an idea about Hyperloop. So maybe you should.
That's a separate talk.
Maybe we should do that once. So, do you have questions? Quick questions because of movement? Yeah,
just one. The other 3 P's of marketing.
Product, place, and people. So it's product, place, price, and people.
Questions?
I think you're the marketing people, so you tell me. No, but those are the 4 P's. But today you probably have to think further, right? Because that was the classic way to think about it, but digital just opens so many other additional P's or additional places that you need to be today. Yeah. Exactly.
How exactly do you make partners? Like sending an email or how?
Yeah, it's the cold calling, definitely. I think it's a good question. So the furniture example. So I found myself, I spoke at a few startup conferences. I went as a visitor as well because I thought this is inspiring. This is something that I can learn from. And then when you're at a startup conference, you usually have 3 different stages, right? Sometimes there are 2, or if you have more than one. If you have 1, it's easy. You just sit there and listen to whatever is coming. But if you have 2, you already have the problem of choice. And then you look at the program and say, so what is really most relevant to me? So of course, I always look for B2B startups because I think B2B is the world I need to be in. And then of course, I look for, e-commerce because it's something that I'm interested in, or augmented reality because it's I'm interested in. But that doesn't get you anywhere because then you move still in that space where you think you feel comfortable in. The other day I was at a startup conference again and I was sitting in the audience and I said, oh, furniture, furniture, furniture. Nothing that I have to do with. But I also wasn't too keen on the other thing, so I ended up listening to that furniture pitch. And I said, oh, these guys solved a problem that's actually relevant to me. And I would have never gotten there if I would have figured furniture, not relevant for me. So how is, well, serendipitous moment maybe, by chance sometimes. Sometimes you come across. As soon as you open your mind for it, you open your mind for opportunity. Yeah? The more narrowed down your focus, well, then you're going to look at and you're going to listen to what you're interested in specifically. But if you want new ideas, you need to broaden that horizon.
Quick follow-up question on that. I guess you talk at least a lot to salespeople or strategy people who actually make those decisions.
Yes.
So the question I would have in terms of your point of view or experience, how do you convince people to actually take the risk of listening to a furniture pitch when they have nothing to do with furniture? Because I think that...
Well, I wouldn't. I usually wouldn't, but I was sitting there and I was booked anyhow. So
it makes a lot of sense, but I see like the resistance in companies and in strategy people. Like, yeah, we need new ideas, but we really can't waste our time listening to startup pitches that has nothing to do with our core business. So, how do you? What have you learned in convincing people to open up in the first place and say, well, let's see what we get from this?
Well, that goes 2 ways, right? The question is, how do you add value? And I'm not doing a furniture pitch because I have nothing to contribute there. And it would be difficult for a furniture pitch to come to me and say, listen to my pitch, because I'm not into the furniture buying business or building business or selling business. So I don't care about it, honestly. unless you have something to offer that you think that I really need. And I think that's your challenge in whatever you do. You need to figure out what your not opponent, but what the other side of the table needs. And I think that's what you do in advertising. That's what you need to figure out who's your listener, who's your audience. What are their needs? What are their pain points that you can figure out? And is there value that you can add to them, into their way of doing business? Is there something that you can do better, etc.? I think that's what you do with Google advertising, or that's what you do with Facebook advertising, or that's what you do with any pitch that you need to do. You need to identify a pain point, and if you have a solution to that, then people will listen.
Last question, or? Yeah. Oh, 2 or 3. Okay, but then...
That's okay.
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting to hear more about how you convinced your own corporation to move into that direction.
That's a tough one. And that, and that is a tough one, because first of all, it's easier when you don't have money to spend, when you don't ask for money. But asking for money at the end of the day sometimes is the key, right? Whether it's from your customers, because everybody will listen still to your pitch, but as soon as you want them to buy something, it becomes tricky. As soon as you want people to spend on something, it becomes trickier. And it's definitely endurance, perseverance, because I'm still being laughed at many times. And we have Hyperloop skeptics, and we have technology skeptics. We have plenty of digitalization skeptics. People who come up to me and say, you're never going to sell a vacuum pump online. It's the case. Yeah, it's an industrial product. How are you going to sell it online? You still need people to explain what it can do. It's not a self-seller. Yeah? And that's still, I have that problem every day. I think the stronger your beliefs are, that helps. The stronger your values are, the stronger you believe in what you're doing, that's what you have to pursue. And that's what any startup has to pursue. That's what every general manager has to pursue when you're doing something new. You need to convince people. And if you give up after the first downturn, you're not taking it anywhere. If you believe in something, push for it. And I was pushing for the Hyperloop, again, in our company a long time. And we have many doubters still that it's ever going to exist. And I don't have anything to oppose them other than my vision that I believe it can do. And you say you believe you can. I said, okay, I have nothing to oppose that statement from, other than last year already, we sold quite a bit in vacuum pumps to quite a few different Hyperloop startups. So I can say, I don't know if this is going to survive in the next 10 years, but right now it's already revenue generating. So that becomes easier, of course. Success stories, it becomes easier. But it's a challenge, and will always be a challenge if you're trying to do something new, convince people of new ways of doing things. So right now we are big into the e-commerce, and again, we still have people, doubters, but then I say, we're not even inventing this shit. Other people are doing it already, successfully. We buy an $80,000 car online today. Did you know that probably more than 80–90% of all the cars sold in Germany are pre-configured online today? So people just still have to go to a car dealership to just sign the deal and contract. It sounds easy, and it is probably easy because it was made easy. But the car itself couldn't be a more complex industrial manufacturing product. It couldn't be. And I don't want to say our products are more difficult, but we just have difficulties in then selling them. So that is a use case, that's a parallel that I can use and say, you know, other people have done it before. It's definitely more difficult if you're trying to do something entirely new that people haven't done, but stick to your beliefs and go for it. There's no other way.
Second question?
How do you pick your partners? So you said you go to the startup conference, you see somebody who does something cool with AR. Would you then say, okay, these are cool guys, I want to work with them?
Yes.
Or would you draw up requirements
Yes.
and pick the best possible?
Again, we Germans try to overanalyze. Yeah, we try to make a business deal out of everything and a big, okay, so what are our options and what's our decision matrix? The thing is, it's the same with hiring people. How do you take decisions? If you do something new, you can't base your decision on empirical data, right? Unless you have that experience. So every time you're trying to do something new, you take that leap of faith. You have to. You take educated risks. You have to take risks to get benefits in return. I'm not saying it always works out, that's where, there's this famous quote from Steve Ballmer, Microsoft, in 2007. Steve Ballmer is not generally known to be an idiot. But in 2007, he said, oh, that iPhone thing doesn't have buttons, and it doesn't have this and that. That's never going to work out. Stephen Ballmer, CEO of Microsoft in 2007. When confronted with that quote in 2014, 7 years later, he said, I had to learn that the most important decisions in my life were to hire the right people, but then also to fire the right people. Yeah, it sounds harsh, but it shouldn't be, because if you're hiring for talent, if you hire for potential, if you hire people for a job description that didn't exist before, if you want to do something new with them, how do you know in advance? You don't know if you don't try. So hire and fire means try and see and learn. Don't overanalyze. If you think you're onto something, give it a try, learn from it, and then develop further. And that's that whole agile approach, isn't it? So the MVP approach today in the startup world is about, you have an hypothesis, this could be something, but I don't know how. So let's figure out, how can we scale it down? How can we make this a provable case, a test case, an MVP, a minimal viable product? And you invest minimum resources to it, and you learn. You get the data, you get the customer feedback, and if it works, you scale it. It's trial and error. And it's the same with partnerships. It's the same with hiring the right people. It's the same with taking educated investment risks. And I think that's that type of thinking that I learned over the past 2 years that is different to our way of doing things.
The last question?
Well, I really love the way opportunities within collaboration and partnerships. What I learned so far when it comes down to actual contracts, it starts to getting difficult. And how do you manage or moderate expectations and keep everyone motivated during the way, the partnership?
Mm-hmm. Is that limited to the contract itself, you say?
Well, it depends. Sometimes I think there are expectations from the corporate and from the startup itself. So how do you keep everyone motivated down the line if you start working together?
Yeah, I think what is key is to, if you have that vision, if you have that hypothesis, review it constantly. Yeah, because you need to stick out that carrot, which could be the vision. Yeah, and say, we're onto something big. This is something that we want to build. Or there's an hypothesis that you want to prove, which is the goal of your corporation. And you just have to constantly review it. Are we still on that track? Is that hypothesis still the same? Are we still working into that direction? If it is, then hopefully it should be easy to communicate that, guys, I know this way, today it sucked and we made an error or we failed, but we still believe in that hypothesis. We still believe in that vision. So tomorrow's a new day and you go for it. I think as long as you can stick to that belief, you have something to go for. That's your selling point if you're creating something new. But be honest to yourself. You need to keep reviewing, are we still on that path? Is that still the vision? Is that still true? Because it doesn't have to be. If you today set out to build a car and you know it's going to take you 5 years, there's 2 ways to do it. There's the German way to do it. You say, okay, you plan it all out and you do all the risk analysis and you do all the different quotes and you do that big project team and you get all the budgets and then you lock everybody into this creative workspace and don't open the doors for 5 years, and at the end you come up with the most beautiful car that you think the world needs. But that's just not the way to do things anymore. Because the way that you probably should be going is, you still have that vision of the car, but what is my way? What's the iterative way to get there? The step-by-step approach, the minimum viable product approach is to say, I still want that car, but the first step is probably a skateboard. 4 wheels on it, it's already, a simplified version of it because it's a transportation method. So you build a skateboard, you have it done in 4 weeks, and you get it out to the market. You start gathering feedback. You verify your hypothesis, and then you come back and say, oh, this actually worked, or it didn't. So your vision, the reason for the partnership changed. Do I still have the right resources? Do I still have the right partners? Or do I need to adapt, learn and adapt, and then take the next step again? So of course you need to review, but if you believe you have the same and the right people in the room, bring them together, and then hopefully it's self-motivating. If the picture is big enough, maybe the picture isn't the right one or the vision to start with, of course.
Thank you.